Hello folks, it's me, Laurel Ann. I am here to talk to you today about the books I read in January. I read 7 of them. I'm going to try to make this quick, so this might be a little less in-depth than some of my wrap-ups, just because it's almost 6 o'clock, it's getting dark, the light already looks terrible, and I want to order takeout. So, here we go. Let's get started right away. The first book I read in 2021 was 2 Stories by Sally Rooney. I kind of just wanted to pick up something that I could like bang out in one day and really start off 2021 on the right foot. And when I saw this on Overdrive from my library, I thought I'd probably like it. I love Sally Rooney. This is kind of an audio bind-up of 2 Sally Rooney short stories that had previously been published elsewhere. I will leave links to where you can read these short stories in the description, just in case you feel like it. The first story was Mr. Salary, which originally appeared in the Irish Times. This is about a young woman who is coming home to Dublin for the first time in a while after being away at grad school in the US. She's coming home because her father, who all throughout her childhood struggled with addiction and substance abuse, is dying. We also see her as she is reuniting with this older man who kind of became a surrogate father slash uncle figure to her when she moved into his apartment when she was in university. Like we usually see with Sally Rooney, there's just a lot more bubbling under the surface of that relationship and a lot of different kinds of power dynamics between these 2 people. The next one was Color and Light, which originally appeared in The New Yorker, and it was narrated by Sam O'Mahony. This is about a young man working in a hotel restaurant and a series of weird interactions he has with this woman who is a friend of his brother's, who is back in their hometown, small hometown in Ireland, for some kind of work event, and he kind of sees her as like a glamorous showbiz type. He sees a lot of mystique around her. These are both very competent short stories. They're kind of that type of short stories that's really just a snapshot. Both of these show characters that are kind of on the edge of a major change, whether they know it or not. They both had the classic Sally Rooney themes of class, wealth, capitalism, and I liked them both, but I do think that the concepts that she likes to explore benefit from having a little more space to breathe. Between the 2, I would definitely say I preferred Mr. Salary. It just felt a little bit more complete, and I understood a bit more like where she was going with it. The other one, if I'm being honest, just like didn't really stick with me. Nonetheless, it was a really nice way to start off the year. Rooney's writing is very precise, and hers is a narrative voice that I find very comforting and relaxing, and it felt nice to be in her capable hands. So nice, in fact, that as soon as I finished that, I decided to reread Conversations with Friends. This is about 2 college students named Francie and Bobby who are best friends, although when they were in high school they were a romantic couple. And one night after they perform in a poetry reading, they meet a sort of locally famous writer named Melissa, who sort of brings them into her circle of rich artistic friends. And it's not long before Frances starts an affair with Melissa's husband, Nick. I love the way this book talks about power. I think so often, especially nowadays, we have this very sort of one-track view of what a relationship between a young person and an older person has to be like. But the story of this relationship is quite a different one. It shows how class and intelligence and mental health and mental illness all kind of intersect when we're talking about interpersonal power. It's just really, really fascinating. I love Frances so much, even though she's such a bad person. I really see a lot of my younger self in her, which maybe I shouldn't admit, but I do. Something that really struck me on this time around that I didn't necessarily notice the first time I read Conversations with Friends is how much Rooney really is able to show you how the other characters in Frances's life see her, even though she is completely unaware of it herself, and she's the one telling you the story. It's really remarkable how those perceptions really come across to you as the reader just by the way the other characters are acting and speaking around her. Ugh, I love this book so much. When I got to the end, I was like, damn, that book was so good. Is it really possible that Normal People is better? So I had to find out, and I reread Normal People. Normal People is about Marianne and Connell, and it starts with them in their final year of high school, where Connell is very popular and Marianne is extremely unpopular. They don't talk to each other in school, but every so often Connell comes over to Marianne's house because she's very wealthy and his mother is their cleaning lady, basically. They start a sexual relationship, and that is on and off, and it varies in intensity all the way through their 4 years of university as they both go on to attend Trinity College. Once they go off to school, the popularity dynamic totally flip-flops, and Marianne becomes very popular and well-liked, where Connell is seen as kind of a weirdo by a lot of the wealthy students at Trinity. And again, the power dynamics at play in this relationship are so fascinating. It all feels very realistic. I know a lot of people don't like the way these two characters have trouble communicating, because a big part of it is how they just don't really understand each other when they talk. But I think that the way it's done in this book is very honest, and I think it is a very real and true representation of how trauma and mental illness can impact our ability to express ourselves correctly and also understand what other people are trying to tell us. Again, I just feel for these characters so much, and I think it's so brilliantly done. But of course, the whole idea behind this exercise was to decide which one do I like more, Normal People or Conversations with Friends. And after reading them both right next to each other, I think I have to decide that while Normal People I think is a more like perfect novel, and it kind of made me feel a little bit more like I cried in this one, whereas I didn't cry while reading Conversations with Friends. I think Conversations with Friends just has a slight edge for me. It just has a little more like je ne sais quoi. It's a little bit rougher around the edges, but in a way that is quite interesting. So anyway, those are my feelings on those. I fucking love Sally Rooney. And then as soon as I finished this one, I saw her announcement that she is coming out with another book. And honestly, I could not be more excited. I know it's not cool to like Sally Rooney anymore, but I don't care. I think she's a genius. So we're just gonna leave it at that. Then I read Watching You by Lisa Jewell. What is this about? I don't remember. This opens with a young woman named Joey being questioned by the police during a murder investigation. And then we spend a lot of time going back and forth between not just Joey, but members of her entire village in the days leading up to this murder. And then also we see some of the interrogations that happen. And there's this whole intricate web of characters, people within this village who are kind of all up in each other's business, trying to figure each other out and watching one another. This is the third Lisa Jewell thriller I've read now, and it's definitely my least favorite by an easy margin. I definitely was really into it. Like, it really kept my attention. I had no idea how she was gonna wrap it up throughout. It even took me a long time to guess who the murder victim was, much less the murderer. This also had some autism representation that I'm not an expert on, but I thought that it was largely pretty good. I have slightly mixed feelings about this. If you've read this, you probably know what I mean. But I thought it was largely sweet. There are some really cute friendships in this. One thing that I kind of realized in reading this book is that I think Lisa Jewell has a lot of respect for teenage girls, which I love. All of Lisa Jewell books that I've read had a significant character who was a teenage girl who ended up being, really smart and resourceful. My main issue with this book is that there was one red herring that she spent so much time setting up and fleshing out that when it was revealed to be a red herring, I was unable to believe it. Still, at the end of the book, part of me is thinking, no, this character must have been what she told us he was for like half of the book. Another thing is that I'm starting to recognize the pattern in Lisa Jewell books. She has like a big narrative twist and then everything gets resolved, and then in the last page she likes to just twist it one more time. And that's okay, I think it's fun, but with this one, that tiny last twist, I still don't know what she meant by it. I can't really explain it without spoiling the book. If anyone would like me to do a full review of this, because I have a lot of thoughts, I don't know, let me know. Maybe I'll do that. Probably not, but maybe. Yeah, it was fine. It was a fun thriller. It did what I wanted from a thriller. I didn't despise it, but again, just my least favorite Lisa Jewell. The next book I read was Axiom's End by Lindsay Ellis. I read this book even though it is a genre that I don't usually gravitate towards because it's written by Lindsay Ellis and I like her video essays. I had some trepidation going in because I'm just not that familiar with science fiction. I don't really know what I like in that genre yet. So this is about a 21-year-old college dropout named Cora who is estranged from her father, who is a sort of Julian Assange type truth advocate, and he has recently released a memo that makes it appear that the United States government has had contact with a species from another planet for some time. And through a series of misadventures, Cora ends up meeting one of these aliens and becoming his interpreter. In the first couple of chapters of this, I found the writing to be quite poor. I think that it's one of those things where she had too much time to look at those chapters and she over-revised them to the point where every sentence was just really clunky and weird, and a lot of them didn't make sense. I had to read them a bunch of times to even understand what she was trying to say to me. And it got me really worried. I really thought that I was going to be giving this book a negative review, and I felt sad about that. But then at some point, I think the writing got better, and I also got used to her voice, and I ended up like really loving this. Cora is not really the kind of character that I usually connect with on such an emotional level. She makes a lot of choices that I wouldn't usually sympathize with so much, and the way she interacts with the people in her family and her friends is sometimes so frustrating to watch. But I think that there's something about her relationship with her father and how that estrangement has affected her in such a negative way, and also the way she has to grapple with his legacy on her life and this image that he has in the public consciousness at large. That was absolutely fascinating. And I also thought that the alien culture stuff, while there's a lot that still I don't understand or like hasn't been fleshed out fully, I thought was really interesting and like really impressive. I guess because I haven't read sci-fi very much, I just am not that familiar with this kind of world building, but to me it seemed just like totally incredible that anyone could think of this kind of thing. I'm just like pleasantly very surprised by this. I'm excited for the next book. Is coming out this year, I think. Next book I read was Eloquent Rage by Brittney Cooper. This is an essay collection, I guess, about Black rage, particularly Black women's rage, and how Brittney Cooper has learned to take that rage and harness it into her advocacy. It also talks a lot about Brittney Cooper's journey in finding feminism and finding her place within feminism. And I think this was the first book I read that really drove home for me why so many Black women just don't feel represented by feminism and how harmful white feminism really is to Black women. This book is so smart and covers a lot of topics that I haven't really heard discussed all that much. I was overall just like kind of surprised by this book because I haven't really heard people talk about it very much, but she's having some extremely interesting conversations there. I think it has led me to see some things in pop culture quite differently. It's also, it's led me to interrogate some of my personal relationships from my past. And it was also just really great to hear a perspective that is so vastly different from mine. Like, her childhood is something that I could not have even imagined as a child or a teenager. Then the last book that I read in January was Exciting Times by Naoise Dolan. This is about Ava, who is 22 years old, freshly out of college, and is teaching English as a second language in Hong Kong. It follows essentially a year of her life there as she falls in and out of two very different relationships. I hate to do this because I feel like every book by a millennial woman is compared to Sally Rooney, but this is very similar to Conversations with Friends. It's got a lot of the same, you know, privileged white people being privileged and clueless about their privilege. But this has the backdrop of Hong Kong. Whoa, what happened? I'm on the other side of the room wearing a different outfit. Well, I'll tell you. I was editing this video and found that the last 5 minutes just fully did not record. So, coming at you from this chair. Basically, this is an extremely relatable story about the sort of aimless ennui of immediate post-grad life. And at the same time, it also offers very sharp commentary on capitalism and colonialism. One motif in here that I particularly loved was related to Ava's work at the language school, where she's required to teach standard British English and correct any version of English that falls outside of that. But of course, that's not the language that she speaks either. She's Irish. They speak very differently from the Queen. And she's very cognizant of the parallels between what she's doing in her job and the colonization and near eradication of the Irish language by British rule. But at the same time, anytime we see her do anything in Hong Kong, she's either at an expat bar, at 7-Eleven, or at Starbucks, and she lacks any and all self-awareness about the irony in that behavior. Anyway, I loved this book. I think it's so smart. It's so me. It's such a Laurel Ann book. This is going to work so well for a very specific type of reader, but not for everyone. I can't confidently say that if you like Sally Rooney, you will definitely like this. I would probably guess that if you hate Sally Rooney, you can just give this one a pass. Just go ahead, cross it off the TBR. But if you are interested in any of these topics and you do feel like you get on with Sally Rooney and would like to check this out, I would also say that a very cursory knowledge of Irish and Hong Kong history is probably a prerequisite. I was seeing some very irate Goodreads reviews that seem to come from a place of just not totally understanding the context. So that's all I'll say about that. Anyway, loved this book. So that's all for me here on the other side of the room. What do you think of this? When I set up the camera, I was like, maybe I'll start doing my videos from here, but now that I'm sitting here looking out, I don't think I'm going to. Thanks for watching. Love you all. Bye. I bought this at Topping & Co, by the way, in St. Andrews, and they put this like kind of library-ish plastic over all their desk jackets. So that's why that's there. I can't decide how I feel about it, but I keep it there because, I don't know, the bookstore put it there and I want to respect their choices. Oh, this is upside down.